Welcome back, everybody, to the Just Talk Hoops podcast. I hope you guys had a great week. Hope you guys had a really good time watching basketball, watching football, whatever you may have been doing. Today, we've got some fun stuff for you. We're not going to be doing as much in terms of just like talking about what has happened in the NBA really recently. I know that's what we've been doing for the past few weeks, so I want to switch it up a little bit. Instead, we're going to be doing a little bit more just talking about maybe some hypotheticals, some projections. We're just going to be talking about the top 10 players in the league who I think have either already become their team's greatest player of all time or could potentially become their team's greatest player of all time. So I'll talk a little bit more about my criteria, what I mean by greatest player of all time for a team, and stuff like that. If you want to read some of my work, title-runners.net. I can't promote the Instagram anymore since it's still down. I'll try and make a new one, maybe get some stuff out on there. But yeah, we'll get right into it. I'm not wearing a jersey today. It's not because I'm entirely out of jerseys. I've still got a few, but I just put on this shirt this morning. I was like, this will work. Got it from the playoffs last year for the Nuggets. We can't just go jersey every time. We got to keep them on their toes. You know how it is. So anyway, getting on to my criteria for what I think greatest player of a team really means, right? This does not mean best. There's a distinct difference between greatest and best, right? For example, look at the Toronto Raptors, right? I think this is one of the best examples of this. Their best player of all time. I mean, the year that Kawhi played there was absolutely incredible, right? He played great basketball. He played very well for the entire regular season and the playoffs, especially in the playoffs, right? Ended up getting them a championship, maybe the best peak in Raptors history. Now, Vince Carter might have something to say about that, but I think the greatest Raptor of all time is pretty easily Kyle Lowry, right? Stayed there for an extremely long time, was consistently great, was on that championship team, was a big part of that, but also was there for a very long time before that as an all-star, as at some point an all-NBA player, right? So Kyle Lowry is greater, even though he's not as good individually as Kawhi Leonard as Vince Carter. So there's a difference between the two, right? To be the greatest, you need to have brought winning to your franchise, right? Your respective franchise. Now, in some of these franchises, they've won a lot more than others, which makes it more difficult to become the greatest player of all time there. But so winning is part of it. Individual talent, right? Like Udonis Haslem isn't the greatest Heat player of all time just because he was there for a long time and won a good bit, because he wasn't the main reason they won. He wasn't an all-star with them. He wasn't an all-NBA player with them. And that's, I don't want to say we're just like looking at accolades solely, because that's not true, right? There's a lot more that defines a basketball player than just their accolades. But it's a pretty good measure for, were you ever a great player if you don't make any all-star games, right? Something like that. So you've got to be at a high level individually. And then the last thing is just you've got, like, hopefully you have some sort of impact on your team. Like, it does help your case if it's like you think about them as a player or as a team. Like, you think of them as a player and they're with that team, right? It's just like they've got to have some sort of impact on that franchise. Now, some of these franchises, like I said, they're not great franchises. So a team like the Hornets, who we'll talk about a little bit today, they don't have a whole ton of like, oh man, this was the era of Hornets basketball where they were like, no, they've made the second round like once ever in the 90s. And it was like, okay, so maybe it's not as much about like winning or cultural impact with that team, and a little more about like, well, who at least was contributing meaningfully to the wins that they did get. So yeah, we're going to talk about 10 different ones. We've got two that have already become the franchise GOAT, but they've done it recently. So I'll talk about those. Like, I think everyone knows LeBron is the greatest Cavs player of all time. Everyone knows Steph is the greatest Warriors player of all time. Like, that's not news, right? So I'm doing a couple that have been in the past few years where I've been like, I can comfortably say they're the greatest player for this team of all time. So those two, we'll start with those. Those two are Giannis Antetokounmpo and Nikola Jokic, right? Let's start with Giannis. Obviously, Giannis, he's been with the Bucks for so long, and this is a good case, I think, of best and greatest not being exactly the same, because you look at the players in Bucks history, and Kareem Abdul-Jabbar was at an extremely high level as a Buck, right? He didn't play there for super long, though. I want to say he played for like 6 years with the Bucks. I'm not sure. It could be a little more, could be a little less. But that's just my guess, right? So, and he won a championship with them, right? In 1971, he won a championship with the Bucks, and he was really great for the Bucks. He was absolutely incredible. Him and Oscar Robertson had great runs together. Kareem, obviously, we know is one of the greatest players of all time, but he didn't stay there for extremely long. Giannis now has been on the Bucks for forever. He holds most of their total records, right? Most of it, like their total points, their probably total rebounds. So, like I don't know exactly off the top of my head, but he holds a lot of those records. That's because he's been there for so long. And when you think of Giannis, you think of him as a Buck because that's all he's ever been. You do get some points for staying, like for loyalty to the team. But he's been absolutely incredible, right? We know the accolades. We know he's a two-time MVP. We know he's a Defensive Player of the Year. We know he's a champion, right? So we know that. But then also just that idea of he has been with the Bucks in their less good years, but then also he's dominated and gotten them to some better years. Now, recently, right, they've been first-round exit for a few years in a row now, but Giannis has stuck around despite all the trade rumors, and it's just like he's such a great Buck, and he's a great player, first of all, and then second of all, like for the Bucks, he's such a great like pinnacle of what the Milwaukee Bucks are. So I think that he's become that. I wasn't convinced of that probably until a couple years ago, and I was like, well, you still got Kareem, right? Because no matter how great Giannis is, like it's difficult to be greater than Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. But I would say for just the Bucks stint, I would take Giannis by a hair now. In terms of careers, though, Kareem still got that. Like I personally have Kareem as my third best or third greatest player of all time. Once again, that separation between best and greatest. But yeah, I think Giannis has taken that title of greatest Buck of all time now. Now, the other one I've got is Nikola Jokic, right? I don't think this one should be debated at all, right? Yeah, I mean, honorable mention to guys like Alex English, guys like Carmelo Anthony. Maybe you could get Dikembe Mutombo in there, right? Maybe like guys like I love David Thompson, but none of those guys are even close to Jokic's level, right? None of those guys reached really an MVP caliber level. Jokic has been MVP caliber for like 6 years in a row. He has easily achieved the greatest individual peak of any player who's ever put on a Nuggets uniform. He's the greatest offensive hub of maybe all time. We watched just the other night, he had 55 on ridiculous shooting. Like, he's been on an insane run recently. He's averaging like 35 on, well, this is before the Timberwolves game last night, but he was averaging like 35 on like 78% shooting. That's nuts. People don't do that, right? Like, people don't just randomly become, like, people don't do that. Basketball players don't do that, except for Nikola Jokic. He's insane. He's an incredibly good basketball player. Obviously, we know the value he provides as a playmaker, right? He's one of the best floor raisers, I think, of the league. Also, one of the best ceiling raisers we've ever seen, just because he makes his teammates so good, right? A guy like Kentavious Caldwell-Pope can really benefit off of Nikola Jokic's playmaking. We're still kind of waiting to see that happen with the guys like Cam Johnson, but we're already seeing this year, right? Tim Hardaway Jr. is kind of filling into that KCP role, where it's like he's doing incredibly at getting open, and then Jokic finds him. The moment, like, you can't double team Jokic because he's such a great playmaker, and it's like that's value. Obviously, too, he brought them a championship, so he's got that winning factor. He's been with the Nuggets his whole career. I don't think there should be any debate that Nikola Jokic is the greatest Nugget of all time. And those other guys are great, right? Like Alex English, shout out to Alex English. Like I think he still holds the points record for the Nuggets, and like he was incredible in the 80s, right? Great scorer. But anyone who thinks Alex English is anywhere near the level of Jokic has not been watching basketball for about the past 10 years, because Jokic is that guy. So now those two I feel like are pretty cut and dry, right? Like they have become these great players because we know they're great players, and now I think they've become the greatest players of their franchise because they've stuck with them for a long time, and they've like kind of amassed these accolades and amassed this success. And you know, there's no direct way to measure this, but they're pretty objectively the greatest players for their franchise. Now we get into the guys who are a little tougher because you have to use some projection, right? So now I'm trying to say, okay, what guys could become the greatest player in their franchise's history? Now this has to take a couple things into account. First of all, how great are they right now? How young are they right now, too? Because if a guy like, I don't know, I mean, Kawhi Leonard, who has played great for the Clippers, but he's not going to get any better, right? So I don't know if he's going to surpass the guys like Bob McAdoo and Chris Paul as the greatest Clipper of all time, right? Then you look at, I'm trying to think of more examples, but like LeBron, just off name, LeBron is probably in the debate for this, right? But he's on the Lakers and he's 40. You know, like he's not, like it's just, he's not going to be able to make a case for that. Right now, I didn't put Luka on this list as chance of becoming the greatest because becoming the greatest Laker of all time is as close to impossible as it gets. Because to become the greatest player of all time, you would have to outplay the years of Kareem Abdul-Jabbar there, the years of Shaq there, Kobe Bryant's whole career, and Magic Johnson's whole career. And that's not even talking about some of the older guys, right? Like the Jerry Wests and the Gail Goodriches and the George Mikens of the world, who are also incredible Lakers. It's extremely difficult to even get considered. I mean, Anthony Davis had a really great run as a Laker before he was traded to Dallas, and he doesn't even sniff that conversation. And it's like you would need to play there for your whole career and win like 3 or 4 championships and be at an MVP level for years. That's not, and then that's just to get you in the conversation. That's not likely. And as much as talented as Luka is, I don't see him winning that much. So we didn't include him, but that just goes to show, like, it's very difficult. Like, you know, a guy like Jason Tatum in the Celtics, these storied franchises, it's very, very difficult to become the greatest player of all time for these franchises. So a lot of these teams are ones with a little less history. So we've got 4 guys from the East, 4 guys from the West. I didn't do that on purpose. I just went through teams and looked at players that I thought could potentially do this, right? And I think it just shook out that way. That's just the way it happened. But we'll start with the Eastern Conference ones. So first one I've got is Cade Cunningham. Now it's going to be very interesting to see because the Pistons have been on a tear this year, right? I like I said, I'm not talking a ton about stuff that's happened in the NBA super recently, but when it comes to Cade Cunningham, this is necessary to talk about because he has been absolutely incredible, and that team has been absolutely incredible. So all of a sudden, you know, for most of his young career now, we've seen him playing great, but the Pistons not doing much because they just haven't been a great team. But now it's like this team could potentially be looking to contend for a championship. I'm going to wait a little bit, see how they look once the later season comes around for me to really say, oh, they're favorites in the East or they're real contenders in the East. But they could definitely be looking to contend for a championship at the moment. They're an incredibly talented basketball team, and he's doing great. I know he missed the most shots of all time in a game, but like, other than that, he's been absolutely incredible. He's a great all-around guard. He does everything you want from a guard. He's been really, really good. The difficult thing for Cade is, okay, you're going to have to win because the Pistons are a very solid franchise historically. Now, they're not to the level of those like Celtics and Lakers, but they're incredibly solid because they got 2 right in 89 and 90. So you got guys like Isaiah Thomas, Joe Dumars, who are big parts of those teams. And then you've got another one in 2004. So there's multiple players, those guys like Chauncey Billups, the Rip Hamiltons, who have sort of a case, Ben Wallace, who have a case as the greatest Piston of all time, but none of those guys reached an incredibly high level, right? None of those guys were ever like an MVP favorite, right? And Cade Cunningham's not either, but if he could get there and the Pistons could win, I think there's a chance. Right, so you'd need him to get to an extremely high level. You'd need him, and it doesn't necessarily have to be like winning an MVP, but if you're consistently All-NBA, you're consistently one of the best guards in the league, which I think is something that Cade Cunningham is extremely capable of, right? then that puts you at the same level talent-wise as a guy like an Isaiah Thomas. And then when you look at like a Chauncey Billups, those guys on the 2004 Pistons, they were really good, but they weren't like consistently top of the league good, right? Top of their position good. They fit really well as a group, but I don't think you can really say, oh, Chauncey Billups was such a great individual player. No, he was a great Piston, but individually not quite as great as those Isaiah Thomases of the world, right? So then you look at a guy, and like there's like Bob Lanier and guys like that as well. I've kind of just been looking at those championship teams since I do think that boosts them. Like I would say Isaiah Thomas is currently the best Piston of all time, and it's very difficult for Cade to surpass Isaiah. But I think the thing's going to be, okay, can Cade become a consistently great guard, like consistently one of the best guards in the league? And if he could get the Pistons to a couple finals, if he could get them to win a finals, if they could be a winning team under Cade, then I think he could definitely do that. I put down percentages for all these guys, right? Like the chance I think it's happening. For Cade, I said like 30%-ish, and these aren't exact. But I think it's less than 50%, right? Like the most likely outcome is that Isaiah Thomas will stay the greatest player of all time for the Pistons. But I think there's a very, very solid chance that Cade could surpass him because he's got the potential, he's got the talent, right? I think there's definitely a chance of that. There for sure is. And with a storied franchise like the Pistons, that's really impressive. After him, we've got another guy who's competing with a really old and storied franchise, and that is Jalen Brunson. So I don't think this is a high chance, right? And this is no offense to Jalen Brunson, but he's not exceptionally young, right? He's already 27 or something like that, 27, 28, right? He's not super young. He hasn't yet gotten them super far. However, Knicks fans love Jalen Brunson. And so you look at the greatest Knick of all time, it's very difficult to kind of pinpoint, right? You got a guy like Melo who didn't bring them a whole ton of success. You've got a guy like Patrick Ewing who brought them to the finals in 1995, but didn't win it, right? He was really great as a Knick, right? I would say Patrick Ewing is currently definitely above Jalen Brunson. But then you look at the guys who actually did win rings, and you've got Walt Frazier and Willis Reed, both of whom I think were on the 70 and 73 Knicks championship teams, right? So I hope I'm getting these dates right. I have them all memorized, but it's 73. It's 70 and 73. And like Brunson, so where does Brunson fit into that, right? Because when you look at those players, it's like you've got a great individual peak in Carmelo and Ewing. I don't think Melo is really that much in this case, except for the fact, like, talent-wise, he's not really there, but Knicks fans love Melo. Like, love Melo, which does factor in a little bit. Patrick Ewing, you had a great individual peak, and then Willis Reed and Walt Frazier, who had great individual peaks and won. Right, so who is the greatest Knick of all time? I think that's incredibly difficult to pinpoint. I think you could make a case that it's Walt Frazier, right, who was there for a good bit of time, who won 2 championships with them, I believe, and who I have a bobblehead of. So that, or not a bobblehead, it's just an action figure. But that's that definitely factors into this equation a little bit, which is why Alan Crabb is the greatest net of all time, because I do have a bobblehead of Alan Crabb. And, that is valuable. Anyway, Jalen Brunson, though, I don't know exactly what he would have to do. First of all, I think he'd have to win a championship, right? To surpass he'd definitely have to get there. But to surpass those guys, he would have to win a championship, because I don't think he's quite as talented as some of those other guys. So you have to win a championship, and you have to continue playing at a really high level, even though you're not, I don't know if Brunson's going to get any better, right? So you need to keep playing at this level that you're at, or preferably the level you were at last year in the playoffs, for 5 or 6 more years, maybe, something like that, and win a championship with this Knicks team. I don't think that's ridiculous, but it's very difficult. That's a more uphill battle than it is for Cade, especially since Cade is younger. Cade has got more potential in my eyes, right? He's got more potential to improve. Brunson might be a little better right now, potentially, but he's not as young. He doesn't have quite as much room to grow. So I think it's gonna be it's an uphill battle for Brunson for sure. I put him down as a 20% chance, like a little lower than Cade. There's still a chance, right? I think that some people would argue that Brunson is already the greatest Knick of all time. I think that's jumping the gun a little bit. I think that's kind of disregarding those guys from the 70s, disregarding Patrick Ewing. I don't think that's really fair, but I mean, you could make a case. I just don't totally see it happening, right? Next guy we've got is actually like the exact opposite of Brunson and Cade, who are great players who have been playing with a storied franchise. We've got LaMelo Ball. The Hornets are about as unstoried of a franchise as you can get, right? I was thinking about, okay, so who's the greatest Hornet of all time, right? Who am I comparing LaMelo Ball to in this episode? And I had to think for a long time about this because I think that it comes down to like four options, right? You've got Gerald Wallace, who played there for a long time, played for the Bobcats for a long time, which is part of Charlotte's history. Played at a really, well, not really high level, but at a decently high level. He was an all-star. But then you look at Alonzo Mourning, who didn't play there for very long, but was really, really solid in the time he was there. Although he didn't even reach his peak there, right? When you think of Alonzo Mourning, you think of him in Miami. But I do have an Alonzo Mourning Hornets jersey. That's got to factor in somewhere, right? Then you think, then you go to Larry Johnson, right? Grandmama. And he's a great player. He was a multiple-time All-Star in Charlotte. But once again, like, he didn't stay for super long because why would you stay in Charlotte for super long? So he ended up leaving Charlotte. And then you look at, like, the last option, which is Kemba Walker, who stayed there for the longest, I believe, of these four, got the most All-Star games, but like he never made it out of the first round, which isn't necessarily a knock on Kemba. I love Kemba Walker. The only one of these guys, it came down to Larry Johnson and Kemba Walker for me. Larry Johnson did get to the second round once, but like, there's just not enough there for me to say like, yeah, Larry Johnson is. No, I think it's Kemba Walker. He stayed there for longer, even though he didn't have success. Like, are we really gonna call a second round exit a bunch of success? So now you look at LaMelo Ball, and it's like, okay, so what does LaMelo have to do? First of all, he's got to stay there for a good bit of time, right? He's got to stay there and continue to play at a high level and make All-Star games and stay healthy, which has been the biggest trouble for him so far. So he's got to make All-Star games. He's got to, actually like provide a lot of value to his team, be a great player for this team. But then you also have to get some sort of winning, right? Like, you can't be a franchise's all-time greatest player if you never make the playoffs with that franchise. I just can't say, like, because what would be the difference between LaMelo and Kemba if he doesn't ever make the playoffs? Because then it's like, okay, well, Kemba was a multi-time All-Star. Kemba played there for a long time. Kemba was really great. And Kemba made the playoffs a couple of times. If LaMelo is a great player, plays there for a while, makes some All-Star games, and doesn't make the playoffs, then there's a difference between the two of them. Now, I'm also not super high on LaMelo Ball's impact on winning. I don't think that LaMelo is someone that I'm like, yes, he's going to be a winner for this franchise. I don't think he should be a first option on a team that's looking to contend for really anything. But the Hornets are so bad that it's like, if they just make the playoffs a few times and LaMelo plays at a high level, the thing is he also needs to stay healthy. So that's the biggest trouble for me. But like, it's really not like, it's not that high of a bar, is all. Right now, I have him at like a 40 to 50% chance, higher than Cade and Brunson. Not because he's any better than them. I think he is worse than the two of them. But because the Hornets historically are significantly worse than the Pistons and the Knicks, right? So you look at the You look at the Hornets, you're like, man, you could definitely overcome that. Now, I think also the Hornets might have some guys, some younger guys who could make a case, right? If Brandon Miller or Con Knipp or something like that really has a great career, then it's like there's a door that's wide open there, wide open. But yeah, I think 40 to 50% chance, and it depends a lot on him staying healthy. Depends a lot on that team eventually figuring something out. But like they're in a weak Eastern Conference, they've got some young talent around him. They could do something. I feel like they could definitely do something. And then the last one from the Eastern Conference, I've got Trae Young. Trae is, I mean, the Hawks are a really solid franchise historically. They're pretty middle of the pack. I think right now you look at the greatest player for the Hawks of all time. You've got guys like, I think it's really a two-man race at the moment between Bob Pettit and Dominique Wilkins. Pettit obviously provided a little more winning value to them. He got a championship with them. He got MVPs with them. Wilkins stayed there for a really long time, though. Had a long career in Atlanta. Had a really great career in Atlanta. Was a really fun player for the Hawks, and those Hawks teams were decent. They didn't win any championships, but they were decent. They were consistently competing in the East. And like, I don't know. So which direction do you go there? Either way you go, like I'd say accolade wise and winning wise, it's probably Pettit, but I prefer Dominique Wilkins. I'd say from a fan standpoint, Dominique Wilkins is a little more present. He's maybe a little more impactful. But you look at a guy like Trae Young, and you're like, okay, well, what do you have to do to get there? I think, first of all, you'd have to have some sort of success, right? So far, the most success he's had is getting to the conference finals, which is no small feat, but then you haven't repeated that since. You've consistently been mediocre while both those other guys were leading consistently good teams, right? And I don't know if you necessarily have to win championships to be the greatest Hawk of all time, but you definitely need to be consistently getting to the second round, maybe the third round, right? Consistently showing that you've got something more than just, oh, well, we're going to be in the play. And again, like they have literally been the definition of a mediocre basketball team for like the past 5 seasons. I think that he's also going to have to continue to play at a really high level. Obviously, he's missing some time right now. He hasn't been great this season. But, I mean, hey, shout out to Jalen Johnson. Maybe Jalen Johnson will become the greatest Hawk of all time. I don't know. I tried to tell people Jalen Johnson was going to be an all-star this year. I tried to tell the world. But we're not talking about Jalen Johnson right now. I just have to give him a quick shout-out. But Trae Young, right, like he's someone who could potentially reach some sort of level like that. The question is how likely is it, right? Like how likely is it that he'll stay in Atlanta his whole career, continue to be a really great player his whole career, and we get to some sort of winning? So I said he was about a 30% chance. I don't think he's incredibly likely. This could even be like a 20% chance like Brunson, where it's like there are some great players in your franchise's history, and even though you're at a decently high level, are you to that level, right? I would say Wilkins and Pettit both reached a higher peak than Young, so now it would have to be, well, you stay there forever, and then eventually you get something, like eventually you get enough, longevity points to really become that greatest player of all time. And this is no disrespect to Trae Young. Like, he's had a great peak. It's just not to the level of those guys. Next, we'll go on to our Western Conference teams. So the first one we've got is the highest percentage by far, and that's Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, who might already be the greatest on their player of all time. He probably is, let's be honest, right? Because you look at Russell Westbrook, you look at, and this is also including the Supersonics, so you look at guys like Gary Payton, you look at Sean Kemp, you look at Kevin Durant, great players, great players. What did they do that Shai hasn't really done? Because Shai has reached the level of peak that a lot of those guys reached. He might not quite be up to the level of like the Kevin Durant peak, but he's still extremely talented. He's still an MVP caliber peak. And he's been the only one of them to lead a team that actually won the championship. So I think for Shai, it just becomes you stay there for a little while longer. Right, you stay in Oklahoma City, which he's going to, and you keep hooping, you keep playing at this level. The one thing for him has been like he hasn't been there for quite long enough for me to give it to him yet, right? Because if he randomly decides at the trade deadline this year, you know what, maybe I don't want to win 70 games, and he's like, yeah, send me to Brooklyn, right? Which please let that happen. But like if he, like if he says, okay, I don't want to be here, like then he's not a lock for greatest player of all time, right? Because you look at those other guys and it's like, well, Russ was hooping there forever, right? And they went to the finals and he was such a great player. It's like, so I can't really confidently say right now Shea's the greatest player of all time. However, the chance of him leaving is so minusculely slim that like it's a 90% chance to me. And he's been absolutely incredible. He's brought this team to a level that they've never been at before. Now it's just, can you continue producing at an extremely high level for a few more years? I think he definitely will. Like, if he just plays out the rest of his contract with OKC and keeps playing the way that he's currently playing, then he's got this on lock. But, I mean, and that's, respect to those other guys. Like, Russ was a great Thunder player, and Kevin Durant was a great Thunder player, even though Thunder fans hate him. And I think part of the reason Russ is in this debate is because fans love him, right? Thunder fans love him, and there's just so much loyalty to that player, right? Kevin Durant, on the other hand, like probably the highest peak of any of these guys, but all the Thunder fans hate him. So how can he really be the greatest Thunder player of all time when they might not even retire his jersey, which is nuts, by the way. But I mean, I think Shea's got an incredible chance of being the greatest player of all time for the Thunder. Which shout out to him. He's been absolutely incredible. I don't think there's any reason that he should there's no reason that he should leave. There's no reason he shouldn't become that. There's just a chance, right? You never know what could happen. I mean, we thought Luka might become the greatest Maverick of all time, and there he is in Los Angeles. Following him up, we've got Anthony Edwards. He's also someone I have as a pretty good chance. I think the chance of him becoming the best player in Timberwolves history isn't super high because Kevin Garnett was at such a high peak, right? But Kevin Garnett never got any winning because those teams around him were god awful, right? So when you give Kevin Garnett, you're like, hey, Sam Cassell and a couple okay role players. It's like, what is he supposed to do with that when the rest of the league is like, hey, look, Tim Duncan, Manu Ginobili, and Tony Parker, and Shaq and Kobe, and, what is he supposed to do there? Those Pistons teams that we were just talking about, like, Kevin Garnett didn't have shit compared to them, so it's like, that's tough for him. But I think right now he's still at a higher individual peak level than Anthony Edwards. Now the question becomes, can Anthony Edwards continue playing in Minnesota at such a high level, and can he bring them some form of winning? I think he's already brought more. Like, if he makes the conference finals a couple more times, if he makes the finals maybe once, then he might cement himself as that spot. Right now, I've got him at like a 70% chance just because Kevin Garnett was such a great player during his peak, and I'm such a huge fan of Kevin Garnett. But I think Anthony Edwards should reach that level just because you're already playing at a really high level. You're already playing at not quite an MVP level, but certainly an All-NBA level. And then you look at his team around him, which is significantly better. The question is, can he contend in such a highly contested West, right? And I know he's made the conference finals the last 2 years, but the West is a gauntlet for this year. And, I mean, you're going to have to deal with the Thunder for the next few years. You're going to have to deal with the Spurs as they get better and better. We're going to talk about them here in a second. You're going to have to deal with the Nuggets, who are still exceptionally good. You're going to have to deal with the Rockets. You're going to have to, there's so many teams that you're going to have to play against and have to outperform to make these conference finals and those finals. So that's the only reason that I think he's not up to that level like Shea, where it's like, oh, this is probably going to happen, because it's like, it might not. Like, maybe we'll never see the Timberwolves in the conference finals again. It's not like they're guaranteed to get back there. It's not like, oh, they're easily one of the top two teams in the West. Like, I don't think they are. They've done really well in the playoffs, but if they end up playing against the Thunder at any point in the playoffs, that might crush your dreams. Next one we'll move on to, we've got Devin Booker, who I didn't really think about for a little while, but then like he's been hooping recently, and I was like, is Devin Booker in the running for greatest son of all time? Now, I don't think he's there yet because you've got some really great players, right? You've got Steve Nash, who led such an incredibly talented offense in those 7-second Suns, right? You've got Charles Barkley, who's got the only finals appearance for the Suns in their history, right? Going up against the Bulls in 1993, right? Or was it? I want to say it was 93, but I feel like maybe, yeah, I want to say it was 93. Anyway, so then you look at those players, right, those incredible players, and you're like, well, is Devin Booker, like both those guys were MVPs in Phoenix. Both those guys were some of the best players in the world in Phoenix. Devin Booker is not to that level. So now it just becomes, does he play the rest of his career there? And do they at some point get back to some form of winning? Now, if he could win a championship, I think that he would rocket to the top of those charts just because that's something those guys couldn't do. They couldn't reach that level of winning. So if he could win a championship, then he could shoot up those lists. But the chances of him winning a championship are very slim, right? Because you look at it, once again, he's in the Western Conference. He's with a team that has been overperforming my expectations, but not to the level where I'm like, hey, maybe this team's a contender. No, they're not, right? And like it's perfectly fine for them to be, like I don't think anyone expected this team to be a contender. But if Devin Booker's looking to make a greatest son of all time case, he's probably not going to get it with this team. Well, he would have to get it with this team, but you know what I mean, like with this roster. But, I mean, I'd say he's at like a 30% chance. I mean, he's been great for them, right? And if he can continue, if he plays the rest of his career in Phoenix, which I don't think he should, but if he plays the rest of his career in Phoenix, then it's like, I don't know, maybe he makes some case, right? If he makes a bunch of All-NBA teams and then plays there, like both Barkley and Nash didn't play their whole career there. If Booker does, he kind of makes a case for it, right? I don't know. It's an interesting one because it's like he's not super young either, but he's still got a good bit of time left in the tank. You think, yeah, or at least I think. But he's an interesting case because he's not super young, but he's been there for so long, right? Last one we've got for the day, obviously, is Victor Wembanyama. Now, the thing about this is the most fun one to me because when you look at Victor Wembanyama, you see some of maybe the most potential we've ever seen in an athlete. Or, well, maybe not any athlete ever, but the most potential we've ever seen in a basketball player, right? But then you look at the Spurs and you look at Tim Duncan, and it's like, that's a high bar. In order for Victor Wembanyama to be a greater Spur than Tim Duncan, he needs to be a top, 5 player of all time and do that all while being a Spur. For anyone else ever, well, okay, maybe not anyone else ever, but for anyone else in the league in their third season, this is an insane ask. You're telling me that you already see enough potential in this kid for him to maybe be a top 5 player of all time. And then you look at Victor Wembanyama, and he stuffs a shot off the glass on one side, and then comes down the other side and shoots a transition hezzy pull-up 3 in a 7-footer's grill and makes them look little. And then you're like, it's not impossible. So the thing is like, will he reach that potential? The question, that's the question, is will Victor Wembanyama reach the potential of being a top 5 player of all time? Then he can be the greatest Spur of all time. The chances of that are low, but they're not zero, which is so nuts that anyone could ever surpass Tim Duncan as the greatest Spur of all time. Now, he's got a lot of ground to cover, Victor does, because they'd have to win a lot. He would have to reach such a high peak. He would have to be there forever. So I've got him at like a 20-30% chance. Maybe let's call it 20, just because Tim Duncan was so good. And it requires Victor to not just be generational, but to be healthy, right? We need to see that. And I mean, it's nuts, but he's got a chance, which is so cool. Like, it's so cool that there's someone that's that good. But I definitely think like there's a chance for him to do it. There's a chance for him to do it because like he's so ridiculously good, and watching him is so ridiculously fun. I love Victor Wembanyama, man. It's not fair, but it's so ridiculously fun to watch. But yeah, I mean, that's all the players we've got. That's all the players we've got. I think that was really fun to do, actually, to just talk about like little mix of all time and current guys. I thought that was really fun. I hope you guys enjoyed that, and we will do, of course, here our games of the week. But let me know, like, in the comments what you guys think. Like, do you think these guys have a chance of being the greatest player of all time? Do you think some of them already are? Like, are you like, yeah, Jalen Brunson is the greatest Knick of all time? And do you know who Walt Frazier is? I don't know, but I mean, he's got a case. But I just think sometimes people forget about those older players. Also, I mean, there's a lot of other guys that Victor Wembanyama has to surpass as a Spur first. I'm not saying it's like Tim Duncan and then Victor Wembanyama. It's like Tim Duncan, David Robinson, George Gervin, Manu Ginobili, right? Kawhi Leonard, Tony Parker. Like, that's a great franchise. But if anyone's going to pass those guys, it's going to be Vic. But yeah, really, really fun to do. We'll do our games of the week right here. So Sunday, today, as this is getting released, we've got... Oh, also, let me talk about last week. So we went 4-3. We started off 4-0 and then dropped 3 in a row. The Raptors upset the Cavs, which was surprising, but cool for the Raptors. Right? That's the ending of that game, right? Let me just make sure because, yeah, Raptors upset the Cavs. Then on Friday, it was Blazers Rockets, and I believed in the Blazers, and I was like, upset alert, and then they lost by like 24, and it was like, all right. Saturday, I had Lakers Bucks, and I said the Bucks were going to win because they weren't going to be able to guard Giannis. They couldn't guard Giannis. Unfortunately, everyone else on the Bucks decided they didn't want to show up to their job that day, including Kyle Kuzma, who played 20 minutes and had a 1 point on 0 for 6 shooting and 5 fouls. And he's on my fantasy basketball team. He's a terrorist. The Lakers, and then I also didn't think about the fact that, hey, the Bucks also need to play defense, and then Luke had 41, 9, and 6, and it's like, oh, all right. And Reeves and Ayton both had 22 and it's 20 plus, and it's like, we're letting DeAndre Ayton, really? Miles Turner, you're letting? Did Miles played that game, right? Did he not? No, he did. He just only had 3 points. Disappointing. I'm very disappointed. So now, Sunday, we've got Magic going to Houston, play the Rockets. Magic have been incredibly disappointing so far this year. I'm taking the Rockets. I'm sorry for downing them last week. This week, we're riding with the Rockets. Kevin Durant and them. Actually, it's Alpy and them right now. Alpy's been hooping. Oh my gosh, he's been really good. Monday, I've got Bucks going to Cleveland to play the Cavaliers. That's a good one. You know, we've got a bit of a division rivalry there. I'm taking the Cavs. I think the Cavs have started to sort of look like themselves a little bit recently. Not to the level that you kind of hope if you're a Cavs fan, but I do think that they're good enough to win this game, and they've also got a lot of guys that can throw at Giannis with Jared Allen and Evan Mobley. Will that stop Giannis? No, but maybe it'll slow him down. Tuesday, we've got Pistons going to play the Hawks. Until the Pistons give me a reason not to, I'm going to believe in the Pistons. They've been absolutely incredible this year. We already talked about Cade Cunningham and that team and how well they're doing. But they've been incredibly impressive. I've been really, really impressed with the Pistons' play. So I'm taking the Pistons in that. Wednesday, we've got another Rockets game because screw it. We've got Rockets going to Cleveland to play the Cavs. This is also another Cavs game. I know I try not to do repeats, but Rockets-Cavs is a fun game. I don't really know which way to go there. I think the Rockets have looked a little hotter recently. Obviously, they lost that one game to the Spurs, but Other than that, they've been on a tear, while the Cavs have been kind of up and down. So, hey, give me the Rockets. Call this me repaying for last week when I didn't pick the Rockets against the Trailblazers, and now I'm picking you for 2 games, so you better turn up. Then on Thursday, I've got Clippers Magic, not because those teams are good, but actually because of the exact opposite. Because, actually, you know what? Why would I reward them for being bad? Give me Spurs Hawks. And my original argument was going to be like, well, that'll at least give us a chance to see like which one of them has maybe got something going for the rest of the season, right? Like maybe the Magic can really turn something up, maybe the Clippers can turn something up, or it's just going to be an ugly game. While Hawks Spurs is a team that's looked really decent recently in the Atlanta Hawks versus Victor Wembanyama, and it's like that sounds like basketball I'm more interested in watching. Give me the Spurs in that. We just talked about how great Wemby's been, and Trey is still going to be out. And I know the Hawks have looked really good recently, but I don't really expect that to continue, especially once they play a great team like the Spurs. Friday, I've got Wolves, Suns. The Suns have been really impressive recently, like we just talked about with Devin Booker. Like he's been hooping. I expect the Wolves have so much perimeter defense and so many great defenders that they can throw at Devin Booker, that they can throw at a guy like Dylan Brooks, who's been playing really well as well. So give me the Wolves there. I just expect them to, like, I think they're a little bit better of a basketball team. Saturday we've got another repeat. I know. It's Pistons Bucks. Like I said, I'm not betting against the Pistons until they give me a reason to bet against them. Give me the Pistons in that one. So those are all my picks. Drop yours in the comments below if you're watching on YouTube. And that's all we've got for today. So we'll get out of here. I'll stop talking. I hope you guys enjoyed. I hope you guys have some thoughts on the matter that you want to share as well. And it was really, really fun for me to be to be talking about something a little different. We were still sort of talking about the recent stuff, but cool to get some all-time stuff in there. Let me know if you'd like to hear more all-time stuff, and I can definitely get some more episodes out about that. I love the history of the NBA. I think it's extremely interesting. We might not get an episode out next week just because I am going to be on vacation for Thanksgiving. I'll try and get one out on one of the 2 Sundays that week, but I might not get both of them, right? But I do hope you guys enjoyed. I hope you guys have a great week. I hope you guys enjoy the games. And yeah, that's all I've got for you. If I don't have an episode out before Thanksgiving, happy Thanksgiving to everybody. Hope you guys enjoy the games that week too. And yeah, I will see you next time on Just Talk Hoops.